Welcome to Ask Psych Sessions, where we ask some of the best teachers we know questions from you, our audience. If you would like to submit a question, please go to bit.ly/AskPsychSessions. That's bit.ly/AskPsychSessions. All lowercase, all one word. And here's our next question. We had such a positive response to our mini-series on online teaching a few months back that we wanted to follow up with a series of what it was like to go online or to do remote teaching for people who had never done it before. Marianne Lloyd had this great idea, and we thought it was worth pursuing. So, special thanks to Marianne, who went and found 6 of the best teachers we know to see what this transition was like for them. And this will be brought to you over 3 weeks, 6 episodes, 6 interviews. Here we go. Enjoy Ask Psych Sessions with Marianne Lloyd.
Thanks for joining us today. We're going to have a series of conversations with faculty members for whom this jump into online or distance learning has been a first-time endeavor as a result of this pandemic. So today we're getting a perspective from Lily Ellis, who's a faculty member at Eastern Michigan University. Lily, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Before we get started, I think a few things are helpful when people are thinking about sort of comparing your story to theirs, and that is can you tell me a little bit about what you're teaching right now, who these students are, or maybe something about kind of class size, because I think all of those factors are going to have an impact in how this transition's going.
Yes, so I'm a part-time lecturer. This semester I was teaching 2 classes. One of them was an upper-level class at my mid-sized, mostly commuter school, and the other was for college credit at a prison nearby. So those students are mostly non-traditional students and clearly have different challenges than my free world students, but in both classes there's about 30.
Great. So I would really like to hear a bit about both of those. So maybe let's start with the one that I think probably our listeners are a little less familiar with, teaching in a prison system and then sort of doing this. So are you getting to do video conferences with your students, or what's going on with that class?
Yeah, so teaching in the prison has presented a lot of challenges all the way through. I'm lucky to have a really excellent co-teacher who's been teaching for a lot longer than me, but it's both of our first time in the prison. So we were surprised when we found out there's no PowerPoints, there's no technology. The students have limited access to even basics like pens, and writing material has been a real like paper has been a real challenge. No video conferences, no teleconferences. I think one of the major barriers is the prison has a lot of rules about over familiarity. So things like we're not supposed to use their first names. We are not allowed to talk to them individually. So, and of course, I have office hours in my free world class, and I feel like office hours are a really important part of teaching for my teaching style, and sending check-in emails and sending any emails at all. And those are things that we just can't do because of the prison's policies. So if we're going to send a message to students, it has to be to the entire class. We can't send it to individual students or like return work to individual students or that kind of thing.
Wow, so then what are you, I take it that you're not now going in?
Yes. So I am glad that the prison made the choice to not allow us in. They made it after my university closed. So there was a moment in time in which the prison was going to let us in and my university had closed, which was a very stressful moment in time. But my teaching team decided not to go in because out of concern for our students, because they just can't social distance. And the prison that they're at, is now a hotspot for COVID. I know at least one of my students is sick through the grapevine, but I of course can't check in on them in the way that I would like. I know that the last I heard, I think it was 64 people that had tested positive at the prison that I teach at, but I imagine that it's more now. So I am very worried for my students, and I know that they're suffering. Yeah, I'm not able to reach out to them or really communicate with them in any sort of two-way fashion.
But are you still allowed to send just sort of a general note to your class to let them know that you're thinking of them, or they don't recommend even that level of personal interaction?
So we have sent two memos to the entire class. There was some back and forth on editing it to make sure that it was not too personal and very professional, because that's the vision that the prison has for us in our relationship with our students, is to be very professional, very distant. It's different from teaching in a free world situation. Um, Even though I do have a lot of care and concern for my students, of course. And so we were able to send two memos to the entire class, and including a PO box, because they can't send us mail at the university anymore because the university mailroom is closed. And so we have a PO box that they could send that they send their assignments to, because even before the lockdown, many students miss class for reasons that are just totally not their fault. Like they're forced into SEG is what they call it, but like a solitary confinement situation, and they can't come to class. And so that's like clearly not their fault. There's nothing they can do to get there. So we have designed the course to be flexible around that already, which I'm very grateful that we made that decision, because then we were just able to send out the if you're absent form to everybody as one of our first memos of, like, we're treating this like all of you are absent for reasons that are outside of your control. So you can do the makeup for full credit and it'll be fine. So it's been very stressful emotionally, insofar as like I'm really worried about my students. I know that they're suffering, but the teaching part of it, I feel like we were actually prepared to do this because of how unstable teaching in a prison is anyways. So I've been grateful for that.
So then so thank you for sharing that. And that's a perspective that, I certainly don't have. I had a sense that maybe when this was done, I should take some time to go in spaces where people are, getting fewer visitors. I hadn't thought about a prison. I thought about working at our local assisted living or volunteering at a nursing home, just sort of thinking about that idea of isolation as being a regular part of people's lives now. So I'm guessing that this experience in the prison actually maybe helped a bit with needing to transition your free world class into a distant situation. So I'm going to take a guess that you probably also have some students that are suffering and struggling a bit, and that maybe that there's going to be some flexibility that you're allowing right now. Maybe talk a little bit about what's going on with your EMU students.
Yeah, so the EMU class has been a little bit harder to put online. I really enjoy in-class discussions. I'm a real face-to-face kind of person, as well as just being a new teacher. This is only my second semester. I'm a part-time lecturer, just figuring it out. And so putting it all online, there was like about a week of me being like, what am I going to do? And sending out memo after memo to my students on Canvas. But then we kind of got into a groove of like online kind of discussions. And definitely one thing that I am so grateful that I like kind of put into my agenda is, so I do optional Zoom meetings, and they're optional, they're recorded, so you can watch them later and get the credit. I don't require anybody to do anything synchronously, because I know that many of my, even before things started, I checked in, and I think it was 90% of my class was working 30 hours a week or more. So these people have a lot of other priorities in their life, especially in the pandemic. So I don't do anything synchronously that's required, but I do have a optional synchronous Zoom chat that happens at the same time as class. And even though it's optional, I get about 20 people out of my 32 person class, which I just keep being surprised by that they keep coming. But I think an important part of that is I do an unrecorded check-in before class starts. Just like, hey, how are you doing? What's going on? How are you guys coping? Um, and it's been really beautiful for me to like have a window into my students' lives like this. I feel like um, in both the prison and in the free world, there is like a pressure not to be human, and I think part of that is like recognizing very real power dynamics, right? Like as a teacher, I have power over my students, and like me being too like open or vulnerable is like putting work on them that I don't want to do. But and like me requiring them to be open or vulnerable is again like misuse of power. And at the same time, like reaching across like those those different roles, I think creating a space for people to like acknowledge that we're all human, that we're all suffering, that it's hard for everybody in different ways. My course in the free world is about aging. And so we've already all been talking about our grandparents, and many of my students have lost their grandparents. A lot of my students are from Detroit, and it's really hit us really hard. And so there's like a lot of grief and death that my students are dealing with. And I feel like acknowledging it, right? Like having a place to say like, yes, this is happening and this is real, um, is what I think is bringing students to these optional classes, as well as my teaching maybe. But I am really glad and grateful for the amount of um, like showing up and not just being there, but like bringing their full selves that my students have done in this course. So if I am teaching in the summer or the fall, like I definitely plan on keeping that because it's gone pretty well.
Well, and I think also, right, it is certainly you're doing a good job if students feel okay with sharing things that are hard to share, right? So I think you're right. Like it is great to have that space, but you also have created that structure that is good. And I think that's really impressive. I think you said it's in your second semester that you're doing that. I feel like it took me a bit of certainly longer than that to do that.
Yeah, it has been quite a ride. So I feel glad that my grades are in. So I'm feeling a lot of relief in reflecting on this. And definitely there are things that I would do differently as far as like the amount. I cut down the work a ton, thinking that students just don't have time for this. And I actually got a lot of feedback that I cut it down too much.
Oh, wow.
So, I think, I'm still requiring weekly assignments. Like, I don't know. But yeah, there are things that I would do differently academically for sure. And I feel really glad about the space that was created by my students and I.
Well, that I think that would be a successful semester anytime, but certainly during a pandemic. So, congratulations to you for achieving that, and wow, even during your first year, which is already a lot of everything. So, really, really great job, Lily. I just want to thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time and being so frank and sharing, especially about this, this model of also doing some teaching in prison. So that's really, I think our listeners are going to be very interested. And I hope that you get a little bit of downtime to celebrate your first year. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you so much. You too.